Hi. Thank you for attending today's reading. Let's begin. I was paid by the school principal back in high school. We had a lot of problems with drugs in the bathrooms. The principal knew me because he was friends with my parents and one day called me down to the office. He told me that every person I saw doing drugs in the bathroom and reported to him, he would pay me $20. By the end of the year I had amounted around $300. And the best part was he never told anyone else about it, so none of my friends knew I was selling out people in my school. It still brings a smile to my face. End of story. Next story. Am I the asshole? Friend of mine asked for a favor for going with him to see his GF in other country. Well, I am 19. My friend that I know for 4 years now, 20. Wanted to see his girlfriend by driving to another country. The drive is 9 hours with the car, and friend asked me to go with him for the weekend. I said yes. And we didn't have any agreements about the costs to the country. For him it was a short vacation, but for me it was just a 9 hours drive, being the 3th wheel. Well, I paid for my staying in the hotel and also for my food. So on the way back he asked me to pay for the gas on the way back home. I was like, bro, that's not really my own vacation and we never agreed about that. In fact, you wanted to go for your GF. Why would I pay for something that I did it for you and not for both of us? Otherwise I could have just took my GF with me and have a nice vacation. He got angry and told me that I was a fake friend and I am being a gold wolf. And he said a lot of terrible things about me and my family. And I was being childish. He knew already that I was broke and didn't have much money, but asked me anyway to go with him for his own vacation. To be the driver so he doesn't go alone and be faster there. So am I the An edit for the post. I bought food for both of us when we were traveling on the way home too. End of story. Next story. RF. I killed a young man who nobody cared about when I graduated high school in 1993. One of the biggest regrets I had was that I didn't go to any concerts, to include Lollapalooza. So I decided to go to Lollapalooza the following year in 1994 in West Virginia. I tried to get someone to go with me, but everyone had an excuse of why they couldn't go. I felt like a loser going by myself. But then I rationalized it by saying it's in West Virginia, no one is going to see me by myself. So who cares? It took me about 5 hours by car from Philadelphia to get there. But eventually I did. I arrived the night before the last day of the concert. I didn't want to pay to get in that night, because it was late and I figured I was going to be there all day tomorrow. I just slept in my car that night. The next day came and the crowds were huge and I kind of just blended in. Even though I was all the way in the back, I still had a partial view of the stage and had a good time. I was waiting in a long line to use one of the porta potties, and this guy named Matt started a conversation with me. I could tell he was drinking, but he had control of his faculties. He had one of those personalities where you felt like you were friends for a long time even though you just met. It took about 20 minutes to use the bathroom, and in that time I bonded well with Matt. I even fessed up and confessed that I was a loser who was there by myself. He kind of laughed it off and invited me to hang out with 3 girls he had met. I had a really good time hanging out with them, and the girls had vodka they snuck in, and we all just partied all night. Eventually, I learned that Matt needed a ride home. He told me he lived around central Pennsylvania in Johnstown, and I told him it was on the way to my home and I could take him. It was after midnight and the 3 girls handed Matt a note, then they left. I was starting to get really exhausted and hinted towards Matt that I was probably going to start to leave to go home. He was fine with that and we both headed out in my car. Matt had passed out the second he got in the car. I knew I had drank a few sips of vodka. But I really just had enough and I just wanted to get back home. Eventually, I made it to Route 80 and I was basically just cruising along. Then, I must have passed out and fell asleep while I was driving. I woke up days later, where the doctors had put me in a coma-induced sleep state to reduce the swelling on my brain. Ultimately, I was fine. I was able to walk and there was no long-term effects. However, Matt was killed. Eventually the cops came to my hospital room and interviewed me. They told me what happened to the passenger in my car and that he had no identification on him. I told him his name was Matt and we were heading to Johnstown where he lived. The cops said that the only thing he had on him was a note that said, "It was great seeing you. I can't wait to see you at the next concert." I told the cops that the note was probably from the girls Matt was with at Lollapalooza. The cops asked me if I knew who the girls were and I explained to them that I didn't recall their names, but I remembered what they looked like. I gave the cops a description of the girls. The cops gave me a court summons. They told me I would be charged for driving under the influence of a drug in the category of benzodiazepines, Klonopin. I said, "What?" The cops said I had a large amount of the drug in my system. I said, "What is that?" They explained that it's a scheduled drug that had multiple uses to include an anti-anxiety effect. I explained to the cops that I rarely drank and I had never took any drugs before. I could only guess that somehow I unknowingly ingested the drugs somewhere at the concert. I talked to the cops and they said since I didn't have any criminal record and that my parents could afford a decent lawyer, they said that I shouldn't expect the worst regarding sentencing. Now I really wanted to focus on apologizing to Matt's family. I was able to get another car and fortunately I still had my license. I went to Johnstown, PA to try to find Matt's parents. I went to the police station and I explained what had happened. The police said they had my report on file but no one came to claim Matt's body. The police said no one has called and they said they had 0 inquiries. The cops said that he was buried in a pauper's grave. Because of the accident and Matt being ejected from the car and severely mangled from the accident. The only description they had of him was the description I gave at the hospital. The police even questioned if Matt was even his name or if he was even from Johnstown. I knew he was a good-looking young male with blonde hair and blue eyes and he was no older than 20. I went to some of the local high schools in Johnstown and I would tell the staff in the main office of my plight and they would show me potential yearbook photos and not one matched him. I then decided to try to find those 3 girls from the Lollapalooza concert that Matt seemed to know. I had a list of the concert's tour dates. I first drove all the way to California and I didn't see any of the 3 girls. Not to say they weren't there. But I just didn't see them. The next concert location was Washington State. I had cashed in the bond money I had as a kid and one way or another, I was going to use the bond money to find out who was Matt. I decided to stay for all of the days at this concert. I really wasn't in any type of partying mode. I just wanted to find these girls and get this load off my shoulders. I started to get discouraged as the days went on and I thought maybe the 3 girls were just West Virginian girls who occasionally attended whatever local concerts were going on. It was now the last day of the concert. I had been sleeping out of my car and I felt tired and disgusting. As I was walking through the crowds, I almost fainted because I saw the three girls from a distance. They were talking to this lone guy. I'm not sure why, but instead of going right up to them, I decided to stay at my distance and watch them. The four of them seemed to be having a good time. Once again it looked like the girls had snuck in vodka which they had put in clear plastic water bottles. As I watched them drink and have a good time, I noticed the girls really didn't drink from the water bottle. They kind of each held it for 2 minutes, then they passed it to the next person. However, the guy would drink from it. It then occurred to me that this was the same thing that occurred in West Virginia. The girl would pretend to drink from the bottle but never actually swallowed the contents. I was just so caught up with everything in West Virginia that I just didn't notice. I could tell for some unknown reason the girls were trying to drug this guy. Mixing the vodka with the Klonopin was actually dangerous as well. Then, like in West Virginia, the three girls left the guy around midnight and the guy seemed to head towards the exit. I know I was caught in a conundrum. I didn't want to leave the guy, but I also wanted to confront the girls. I decided the best thing to do was to make sure the lone guy was okay. I could tell by the way he was walking that he could have collapsed at any moment. He made it to his car and put the keys in the ignition. I then hastily ran up to his driver's side window and knocked violently. I was not going to let him drive away. I told him, "Stop. Don't drive. You're not going to make it far." He seemed to be half listening to me and actually passed out while I was talking. I reached in and removed the keys from the ignition. He then mustered up a little bit of energy and said, "Why did you do that for?" Quote, I told him that he had unknowingly ingested drugs. He didn't believe me and said, "I just had a little bit to drink." I explained to him that the drink was mixed with a drug. I then was trying to figure out a motive. I asked him if he any identification. He kind of felt around his pockets and said, "It's gone." Quote, I replied, "Your ID?" Quote, he responded, "No. My wallet." I then realized the motives of the girls. They would find a lone guy and engage him. Then at a chance moment they would take his wallet. Then it dawned on me that my wallet was never returned to me either. I thought it was just lost in the car crash. The cops were able to ID me through my car's VIN and other information I had. It was really the furthest thing from my mind up until now. I threw the guy's keys in his back seat and he promised he would pass out and sleep in his car for the night. I quickly ran back to try to catch the girls, but they were gone. I knew where the next concert was heading and I figured I would be able to possibly run into them somewhere from here to the next location, and I actually did. After I was done searching the parking lot for the girls, I then into town. I saw the three girls in the parking lot, where they were heading into a diner. I followed them in and greeted them like we were best friends. I could tell they looked extremely awkward. It wasn't in their plans to make friends. I said, "Don't you remember me from West Virginia?" Then one of them said, "Yeah, that's right, you were with that guy." I explained to them, "Yeah, that guy Matt is dead." Quote, the three pretended to care and said, "Oh, that's terrible." I then responded, "You know I passed out while driving." One of the girls said, "That vodka must have hit you hard." I said I only had a few sips. It wasn't the vodka, it was the pills you mixed in the vodka. I then responded that, "I watched as you did the same thing to this guy tonight." They didn't deny it. Eventually they said that they do it to pay for their concert hopping. They explained they pick a lone guy on the last day of the concert and give him the mixed drink. and then kind of jokingly dance with the guy to take his wallet. They said their intent was just money. They then went on to say that as far as for Matt, they said they don't remember his last name, but they said they recalled his ID was from Georgia, because we were then all joking about peaches. They said they took the money out and threw his wallet in the trash. I then decided to call the police at the diner. I just wanted a report to use for my court case. Of course the girls lied to the police and I had no way of proving it. The next day I made the 3-day trek back to Pennsylvania. When I got home I dialed information and got the number for the Georgia Police Department. I explained to the detective on the phone what had happened to Matt. I gave the police his description and they said to call back in a week. And they would look into it and get back to me. I anxiously waited a week and I called back. They said, "We not only searched the Georgia database. We expanded the search to the whole country," and they said they had no matches. I said that it must have been over a month and no one felt compelled to reach out to the police to file a missing persons report. The cop from Georgia told me to wait another month and call back. I waited a month and still no missing report had been filed. A year went by and still no new information on who Matt was or where was he from. He may have had a friend or relative in Johnstown, or maybe he knew no one at all. I was essentially given just probation that eventually got expunged from my record. I would follow up each year and it was a complete cold case. I really don't know if those girls were lying about Matt being from Georgia. As the millennium approached and social media became popular, I posted his information on MySpace, then Facebook, and 25 years later no one has come forward with any information. I read a story similar to this years ago and it always stuck with me. After writing this story I did a search and it was actually solved. It is still extremely disturbing that it took so long to solve. Jason Patrick Callahan. End of story. That is all for today. If you want to support my automated channel, feel free to drop a like and subscribe. See you tomorrow.